Hello and welcome to Catalyze Music Academy. My name is Zaak Kerstetter. I'm an Ableton Certified Trainer. And today I want to talk a little bit about how to build your own sampled instruments from scratch using any source material that you want. Before we dive too deep into it, I do want to let you know if you are enjoying the content on the channel, please feel free to subscribe. I release videos on every Monday and Thursday, as well as streaming here on YouTube on Tuesdays and Fridays. Before we talk about how to build a sampled instrument, let's talk about like why you might want to do this. Like, why would you want to build a sampled instrument? And there's a lot of different reasons depending on your workflow or just kind of the style of music you're making and what kind of things you're doing in your studio. The first major reason I can think of is CPU. If you're doing a lot of really processor intensive sound design where you have like lots of effects and really fancy synthesizers and third-party plugins going on that really eats into your computer CPU, and you could just freeze and flatten those tracks and turn them into audio, but then you can't change your MIDI notes anymore and you can't like really kind of play with it the same way you can when you still have the options with MIDI. So by building a sampled instrument, it reduces your CPU, but still gives you plenty of creative options still at your disposal. Kind of along the same lines, if you are building a really kind of like big, comprehensive live performance setup and you don't feel comfortable using a lot of third-party plugins on stage because, again, it's either CPU or issues with crashing potentially, you could resample a lot of your plugins or a lot of your sounds into sampled instruments, and then it's going to be really light and really easy on your computer. On top of that, if you are collaborating and say somebody you're collaborating with doesn't own the same plugins you do, again, you could freeze and flatten it, but maybe they want to be able to play around with the MIDI and change things up. You could, again, sample an instrument, send it over to anybody you want. As long as they own the sweet version live, they should be able to use it just fine. And yet another reason to try this out is if you are an instrumentalist or a vocalist or somebody who just has a lot of like instruments lying around your house, you could take those instruments, record them into your computer, and then build a MIDI instrument out of those so you could play them anytime you want with your MIDI controller. So I've seen a lot of people do this for different reasons, especially if they have like a really cool, unique, like an old antique piano lying around or something like that that has a really unique sound to it. You could build your own instrument from scratch that nobody else has access to. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we're going to be doing this for the purposes of this video. So right now I have a little Serum Patch going on here. It sounds a little like this. Nothing too fancy, just a little saw wave, a little kind of weird wavetable, a formant filter, a few effects going on, and then a few effects in live. Sounds like that. So what I did here in order to resample this is I'm going to resample 1 octave of this sound. However, when you are putting together your own sampled instruments, you can resample as many or as few octaves as you want. But for right now, to keep it simple, we're just doing from C0 to C1. So what I did is I put in quarter notes for each one of those. So each one of these MIDI clips is just a quarter note of C0. This one is C sharp 0, D0, etc., all the way up to C1. So quarter notes, individual clips in the arrangement view. That's all I did. So we're going to take this and we are going to freeze this by right-clicking on it and hitting freeze track. And then we're going to right-click again and hit flatten. And now we have essentially audio versions of each one of those notes. And there's a little tail here that we're going to go ahead and select and delete to get rid of. So we're going to take these sounds and we need to load them up inside of a sampler. So we're going to go to our sampler instrument. It's also on this MIDI track right here. And I'm going to select one of these guys, hold down Shift to select all of them, click down here, and just click and drag where it says drop sample here. So now it says 13 of 13 samples are selected. And if I play a MIDI note, it's going to sound kind of crazy. It sounds like it's basically playing all of the notes at the same time, which is not what I want. So I need to set this up in a way where specific MIDI notes trigger specific samples within my sampler. And to do that, I'm going to hit the zone button right here. It's going to open up the zone area, and we can see each one of these is one of our samples. And then over here, we have basically a piano roll up top with a bunch of green bars underneath it. Now, the way this works is when I play a note, you're going to see it light up red. You can see it lighting up red there. And anything with green underneath it will play. So if I shift select all these guys and I move this over here and I play that note, nothing is playing because there's nothing with green underneath it. But if I take this one guy and I move this here, it plays that one. So what we need to do is set this up. We already know what notes we're playing, C0 up to C1. So we need to assign each one of these to the particular note that I want to be playing. So I'm going to take this just by clicking and dragging here where I get a little bracket. I'm going to move this over to C0 and take this guy and I'll move this all the way down here to C0. So now if I play any note around C0, it's not going to play. But when I play that C0, it actually plays it. However, you'll notice that it sounds a little crazy. This does not sound like the sample that I originally started with. And the reason for that is that C3 is going to be the default root note for all of these samples. Meaning if you play the MIDI note C3, it'll play the original recorded pitch of the sample. So right now it's pitching this down by 4 octaves basically, which is why it sounds terrible like that. So we can change the root note by going down here while this sample is selected and just where it says root, just clicking and dragging this up and down. We can see there's a little R icon right here. That'll move around as I move this. So as I move this closer to C0, once the root note matches the note that I'm playing, it sounds the way it should, the way it was originally recorded. You can also, if you want to save yourself a little bit of time, you can hold down the Option key and just click in here. I believe it's Alt key if you're on Windows, and then it'll just move the R wherever you click it. So that can be a little faster if you're doing a bunch of this all at the same time. So that's kind of the process here. We're making our MIDI note match the sample and making sure it's actually playing the frequency we want it to. However, instead of individually doing each one of these, we can just do all the rest of them at the same time. So this is how we're going to save ourselves a bunch of time and make this real quick and easy. And to do this, I'm going to shift select all of the ones that I have not changed yet. I'm going to take the lowest note and match it up with the lowest note that we're playing here, which is C#0. And I'm going to take the highest note and match it up to the highest note that we have in here, which is C1. So we're going from C#0 up to C1. That's the range of the notes we have not yet placed. Then what we're going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to hit distribute ranges equally. When doing this, it's going to automatically divide up each note and put it on the particular note it's supposed to be at, as well as moving the root note to go with it. So now as I play this, everything plays exactly the way it's supposed to. So if you're doing this for multiple octaves, just make sure the range of your MIDI notes or the range of your samples goes through all those octaves. Right click, distribute ranges equally, and then boom, you're basically done. So this can save yourself a lot of time and make this whole thing really easy. So now that I've done that, I can click on individual samples here and I can like edit different parts of these samples. I can like tweak different features here. Or if I, again, hit Command A, it selects all of them, and we can do things like turn loop mode on. So now if I play one note, it'll just loop. And that applies to all of them. Everything on all of the other pages here is global. So for example, if I like get the filter involved and I start playing with the filter, that applies to everything. Same thing with like our volume envelopes. And we can start like tweaking this to dial this in to make it sound the way we want to and kind of expand upon some of the sound design I've already done. So for example, I can take the number of voices, make this monophonic. I could go into like the FM oscillator and do some cool weird FM stuff with it. We could get some modulation going, maybe get like a little LFO on the filter frequency and start tweaking it to my heart's content. And then of course I can then save this as a preset, use it whenever I want. It's really light on CPU. Anybody with Live Suite can open this and play it, and I can continue tweaking it. So for the reasons mentioned at the beginning of this video, really, really handy for a variety of situations. And again, if you are like an instrumentalist, you could record every single note on your guitar, lay it out in the piano roll here, divide your ranges equally, get everything lined up the way you want to, and it'll sound pretty good. And you can play it with your MIDI controller, you can play it with your push. You could be at the airport and you can't whip out your guitar, but you can still play a guitar part. Really, really handy for a variety of reasons. And as hopefully this video demonstrates, pretty easy to do once you kind of get your workflow down in terms of like how you can take a bunch of samples, load them up, divide up the ranges, and then kind of like tweak it from there. So that's it. If you have tried this out, let me know what kind of sounds you're putting in your sample instruments, or maybe if there's another reason you built sample instruments, let me know in the comment section below. But as always, I thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you in another video. And again, thanks for watching.